let's just say it. Parenthood is hard. Being a single parent, that shit is real hard. I have a husband. But when I was pregnant, with our third child, Bella, who is now 3, I had this growing anxiety inside of me that I was going to parent alone all over again. You see, my husband, Joe, is a recovering drug addict and alcoholic. Today, he is 7 years sober. But for years, even when he was home, he wasn't really home. When our first 2 children were born, I was a single mom. I raised them, I fed them, I made sure they were alive. I did it all by myself. So when I was expecting again, I had this growing anxiety inside of me that I was going to be in that position again, even though Joe and I were in such a better place in our lives. After the baby was born, my anxiety shifted from rage to fear. No, from fear to rage. Let's reverse that. I have what a lot of people have never heard of. I have postpartum rage. I physically and verbally lash out over things that a normal person otherwise would not. I go from 1 to 100 in 2 seconds, seeing red. Postpartum rage isn't an official diagnosis. It is still considered a symptom. Postpartum rage is overwhelming and comes with a lot of guilt and shame. So I love data. Data helps me explain all things around me. So I have a few stats to share with you so you can have a better understanding of what I'm talking about. In the US, 1 in 8 women will suffer from postpartum depression. From the 1 in 8, 60% did not receive a clinical diagnosis, and only half received treatment. Postpartum psychosis, a more extreme form of postpartum depression, occurs in 1 in 1,000 women and is one of the leading causes of the murder of children ages 12 months and under. Death by the maternal parent occurs in about 8 in 100,000 births. But I didn't know any of this. After 3 kids, I still didn't know that there was a clinical explanation for the wild episodes that I was experiencing, lashing out at my husband and my children. I was filled to the brim with a dangerous cocktail of emotions that could overflow at any moment. And when a trigger went off, I could not stop myself. I had no idea what the triggers were. They were so random and unconnected. Like the time Joe took me to Peoria to go have Mexican ice cream. He found a hole-in-the-wall place that served it, and I was craving it. On the way home in the car, we started arguing. Don't know about what. All I know is that I got filled with rage and saw red. I threw my cell phone at him while he was driving and hit that right side of his face. I thought he was going to punch me, and I was like, bring it. My children, Miles and Luna, were in the back seat yelling at me to stop. I turned around, told them to mind their effing business. They don't know what they're talking about. Joe's right side was bruised and swollen, and I had no remorse at that time. I didn't care. These bouts of uncontrollable rage were mainly directed towards Joe. I thought I was angry and resentful, dealing with all the years of his addiction. There were times where I couldn't stand him. I wanted him dead, literally. Once, I followed him to the basement. For whatever reason, we were going to the basement. I was behind him on the stairs. And I pushed him as hard as I could. He turned around, asked me, "Did you just push me?" I said, "No, that's crazy." And then he gave me this look of, "I don't believe you, but okay." But all I remember thinking at that moment was, I should have pushed him harder. It took me a long time to seek help. My mom is addicted to painkillers and has been on antidepressants since she left my dad when I was 3 years old. Watching her abuse her medication made me hate pills. So when I would go for my postpartum checkups, I wanted nothing to do with medication. So I chose the path of fixing myself by myself. I read lots of books, did tons of Google research. I even tried talking to my husband. But I did hit my point of no return in March 2018, 8 months after Bella was born. I was at Walmart by myself. I was fine, browsing aisle through aisle. Then all of a sudden, I stopped in the party section, and I got this overwhelming feeling of fear. I started crying uncontrollably, and I was having such a hard time breathing. People came up to me and asked if I was okay, and I said, "I don't know." I took out my phone, and I called my friend Alicia. And she said, "Dude, you're having a panic attack." She helped me get out of Walmart and walk to my car. In the car, I got the courage to call my doctor. But unfortunately, they couldn't see me for over a month and suggested that I go to the ER. I decided I wasn't going to go to the ER because I wasn't going to spend $500 just because I'm crying at Walmart. I made my appointment, though, for the following month, and I showed up. I talked about my panic attack at Walmart, my episodes, my rages, my fears. I let it all out. My doctor told me that she would not let me leave her office until I started medication. I felt so defeated and so useless. I cried in her office for about 45 minutes, and then I finally surrendered. I couldn't do it on my own anymore. I have to face the fact that I have a chemical imbalance. I have a mental illness. Postpartum depression is no joke. When I reflect, it was then that I was able to reflect on what happened with my firstborn, Miles. And I am horrified and incredibly saddened and heartbroken. I am fortunate that my son Miles doesn't remember anything yet, and I really hope he never does. So I'm 25, giving birth to Miles. Joe is high as a kite. And for the first 2 months, I'm on autopilot. I fed, I burped, I diapered, I made sure the baby didn't die of SIDS. I did everything, and it was just routine. But there was no love, and there was no bonding. When Miles was 3 months old, I was holding him in my arms on my bed, and that was the first time I was like, oh my God, I have a baby, and he's my baby. And Miles was such a sweet baby, and he was always happy and always smiling. And even though I did everything for Miles, I was clearly second choice. Miles only wanted Joe. only wanted Joe to hold him. And that made me mad. And that made me jealous. When Miles would cry for his dad, I would pin him down to the ground and yell at his face, "Stop crying. He doesn't love you. He's not here." When Joe was home, all we did was fight. I would break shit, throw shit, all in front of Miles. When Miles was starting to walk, I would pick him up by his shirt and pin him to the wall and cuss him out and yell at his face. My life was out of control, and I took it out on him. 2 years later, Luna was born. Joe's addiction is worse, and now I have 2 kids, which is crazy because I didn't even want the first one to begin with. So now I have 2. And Joe wasn't the only one that was worse. I was sinking deeper into my illness. I don't remember much of Luna as a baby. I don't remember the first time she called me mama, or her favorite toy, or her favorite song. I do vaguely remember that people would come over to relieve me and offer to hold her, and I would say, "Nope, I got this." I do remember when Luna would cry, her eyes would fill up with tears, and her mouth would go down, and she would just cry silently. Then there was one time I took Luna and Miles to Griffith Park to ride Thomas the train. I unbuckled Miles from his car seat and grabbed Luna and went back to the driver's seat to breastfeed her. Miles had climbed over the seats and was now standing in the driver's seat, frustrated and exhausted. I snapped at him to move, and I backed in to sit down. I heard a pop and a scream. His knee bent back, and I yelled at him, "This is what happens when you don't listen." I broke his growth plate, and he was cast up to his hip. Miles was 2 years old. Oh, thank you. Oh, thanks. Okay, that was a lot, so I need to take a breath. During that time, I didn't know that I had serious postpartum depression. No one talked about it. I can now understand the horrific news stories you hear when a mom drowns all 4 of her kids in the bathtub or drives herself and kids off a cliff. Today, I am so proud to say that I got the help I needed, and I am currently on Zoloft, which I should have taken after Miles. I went to therapy, participated in support groups. I still have episodes here and there. But I no longer want to kill my husband, and that's a win. I am living a really good life right now, and my children are happy and healthy. There are so many people in this community that reached out to me and helped me along my journey. People who brought me food, lent a shoulder for me to cry on, people who let me vent, even someone who gave me a job so I could find myself again. Thank you, Julie. And I am so grateful for everyone that reached out to me. During these past few weeks, working on this story, I uncovered even more realizations about what I went through. Remember when I said I didn't want to go to the ER because I didn't want to pay $500? Well, that's not the entire truth. I didn't want to go to the ER because I didn't want to be seen as a bad mom, as a violent person. I didn't want my children to be taken away, and I didn't want to be admitted for wanting to harm my husband. There was this realization that what I did would be considered abuse. There are so many scary things about having a chemical hormonal imbalance that takes you to such dark places. And we judge. And we are just so afraid to ask for help. I did some pretty awful things. There are even scarier stories out there of women who do the unthinkable, and we judge. And we ask ourselves, how could that be possible? But I know. And I know that I am not alone. If this is you, stop caring what people think and reach out for help. It is the stigma that keeps us silent and suffering. Let it be okay to not be okay. Tell someone your story. Thank you.